You're listening to She's the Business podcast. Right. Well, welcome, Nikki. I have Nikki Rausch here with me, who is the founder of Sales Maven. Thank you for joining me today, Nikki.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Jessica.
Yes, me as well. I think that, when we are looking at guesting on podcasts and things like that, even hosting a podcast, we often are thinking about it in terms of visibility and reach and the sort of the PR aspect. And I love that we're going to bring a bit of a sales conversation to this today, because it is such a beautiful opportunity. And, I really want to tap into your expertise and your knowledge around this. But before we dive into all of that, let's just hear a little bit from you about who it is that you serve in your business. What is your business? What do you do?
So my business is Sales Maven. I'm a sales coach and trainer. I specialize in the conversation of sales. So I have a signature framework that I teach. It's called the Selling Staircase. And the idea behind it, I primarily work with women in business, and I teach them how to get more comfortable in their sales conversations, because I find a lot of times it's the thing that people shy away from. It's like, I'll spend a bunch of money on marketing, and then I get these leads and I just want them to buy. I don't want to have a conversation, but yet a conversation is usually required. So I feel like if I can get people more comfortable in those conversations, give them some structure to how to have more of a successful conversation that still allows for their genuine personality to shine through, then they feel more confident, and ultimately they close more deals, which means they are able to bring more revenue into their business. So that's what I do.
Amazing. And that's just, it's so critical, isn't it? Like you said, we can have people who are there who are literally almost ready to buy, and maybe they just need that one little thing to help get them over the line. And the sales conversations can turn into something that feels so awkward. And I know I speak from personal experience here, because being a marketer, that was my background. So I was in corporate marketing for 20 years, came into my own business, and I was suddenly like, okay, I've got to get on these calls. And you're going to laugh. I haven't actually shared this before, but I used to not tell them the price on a call. I'd say, I'll email you. Because I was too awkward to even so there was zero closing, shall we just say, that was going on my sales calls when I began. And I used to do probably all of the wrong things. I'd love to, we'll dive into a bit of this, but, I used to get on there and I'd share with them all of the things that I could see, and I'd give them so much value on the sales call. They probably went away thinking, this is great, I don't even need to hire her.
I did all of those things. Often talk people out of hiring us just by doing exactly what you're doing. And just so you know, you're in really good company, because a lot of the people, when they come to work with me, are either doing what you're saying, like, I'm giving so much free advice that people are then like, that's amazing. What do I need to pay you money for? I got all the answers. Or they think they have all the answers, right? Or they're so afraid to talk price that they end the call without closing. And that is such a huge disadvantage, not only for you, but for the potential buyer, because you've now prolonged them making a decision about something. And we have what's known as decision fatigue. So people get so caught up in like, well, now I've got all these other decisions to make. So then oftentimes you'll lose the business that you could have earned just because they're bombarded with so many other things they have to make decisions about.
Yeah. And you've kind of put it off, and it becomes like your Amazon wish list that you never go back to.
Yes, that's a great way. That's a great analogy of it. That's perfect.
Yeah. I just want to dive into a little bit of this before we start on the other stuff, because I'm like, there's so much that we can talk about here. But how do you handle, this is something that happens, I think, commonly, certainly in my world, and I'm sure other people have it as well, but you might get somebody on a call and, you're not the only person that they're speaking to. So at the end of the call, they're like, this is great. This sounds amazing. But I've got these other people who I'm talking to as well. So they're not kind of in the place where they are ready to make a decision. How do you handle that? Because I always really respect that and think, well, I totally get it. You want to, have a look around, and, I never want to put pressure on anybody. So what do you say in those sort of situations where somebody isn't really ready to make a decision at that moment?
So I offer to schedule in those moments what I call a circle back call. I teach this as a technique. So if somebody said, oh, this is so great, and I have a few other people I'm going to talk to, I would say, that's excellent. That's, that shows you're going to make a really smart decision. Are you open to us scheduling a circle back call for after you have those conversations, just so that I can answer any additional questions that come up for you? And then if it makes sense for us to continue down this road of working together, we can make some decisions then. Can we get that on our calendars now? And I'm going to try to get on your calendar, because chances are the last person they speak to is the person they're going to hire. I want to be the last person that they speak to, if at all possible, because this is one of the reasons it's so important to have sales conversations. Is oftentimes people are just one question away from hiring you, and you have to put yourself in a position to allow them to ask you the question so that they can get that answer, so they feel rest assured, like reassured, this is the right person for me, so I'm ready to move forward. And then you can issue that close statement. So offer to schedule the circle back call. Now, you don't have to be pushy or aggressive. It's just an ask. And if they're like, no, I'll call you, if you're the person I want to work with, I'll call you, that's fine too. Then you can say, great, then I'll look forward to hearing from you. Please know how much I would absolutely adore working with you and earning your business. And I'll talk to you soon. Like, that's okay. But don't just let it off the hook. At least try to schedule the circle back call.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting, because I think that that's happened. I reflect back, and I haven't done that. I haven't scheduled the follow-up call, but I've always reached out and followed up. And it's interesting how often when you haven't heard from somebody, and I'm like, well, I said I was going to follow up, I'm following up, and you ask them, do you have anything that you just, that you're not sure about, a question? And the number of times they come back and say, yeah, there is actually something that I really want to ask. And they aren't forthcoming in reaching out and asking the question. They sort of tend to wait until you reach out and ask them, do you want to ask another question? Is there something else? Yeah. Which is so interesting, right? Because I've noticed this. And even though when we end the call, or even if I send the email, I'm always like, please, if you have a question, please reply. I'm here to answer it. I really emphasize that. They don't until you follow up and say, hey, you got a question?
Well, and a lot of that, so a lot of that goes back to the fact that your job is to make it as easy as possible for people to hire you. And this is why the circle back call is so easy for them, because now it's on their calendar. Now they see it on their calendar and they think, oh, when I get on the call with Jessica, I'm going to ask her this question. But I don't know about you, but like I often think of things like, oh, I'm totally going to reach out to so-and-so today. And then today goes by, and then I'm going to reach out to him tomorrow. And then, I got busy today, so I didn't. And it just keeps like getting prolonged. I mentioned this idea earlier about like people are tired, they have decision fatigue. I don't know if you've heard these stats before, but they say that the average adult makes a certain number of decisions in a day. Have you heard this before? So think about like just your day-to-day life. On average, how many decisions, and your audience can do this too, how many decisions do you think you make in a day? If you had to guess.
Oh, goodness. I don't know, 50, maybe.
Okay. So they say the average.
So I'm like, I'm making decisions about them all the time, let alone myself.
Yeah. That makes sense. So they say the average adult makes up to between 30 and 60,000 decisions a day.
Okay, so it's just a few thousand off then.
Just a couple. You're so close. And that might seem like that number might seem incredibly crazy, right? Because it's such a big number, but realistically, you're making decisions all day long about all kinds of things, like what's the temperature of the shower I'm going to take today? Like how am I going to stir my coffee? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Like you're constantly making decisions and not thinking about a lot of them, because like some of them are kind of knee-jerk decisions. It's like, oh, I do it this way every day, but I'm going to probably still do it this way tomorrow. But then there's all this other stuff. So our brains are tired. And so if you don't make it easy for somebody to hire you, to make that decision, oftentimes they won't decide. So when I say that often people hire the person they talk to last, it's because now it's easy for them to make that decision because they're there in the moment. And it's easier to make a decision in the moment versus like, well, let me think about it and put it on my to-do list to think about. And now it goes behind the other 30,000 decisions I make tomorrow. And then the day after that, now you're 60,000 decisions down. What are the chances you're ever going to make it to the top of their decision list? Like pretty slim. So your job is to make it easy. And the easier you make it for people, the more inclined they are to hire you when they have a need, when they've expressed interest.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. You know, breaking down the barriers and just make it easy for them. And then they're like, oh, this just seems like the path of least resistance. They probably feel drawn to it. Maybe you're thinking, I'm drawn to this one. It's because it's so easy, right? And it's not difficult. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And there's so many ways that we can make things easier for people. You know, I'm always I'm loving these tips because I'm like, oh, I'm going to use some of these myself, I think, in my business. But you know, thinking about things like what you're asking people to do even before they've signed up with you or before they get on a call. And some of the ones, you know, it's like, oh, all of these questions before you jump on a call, or you've got to complete these huge onboarding things before you pay. And I'm like, oh, no, let's make it really easy to sign up. And then you can do all the questions that you need afterwards. But
that's right.
It's just some really simple kind of tweaks like that. I think, again, you know, I love that you've even brought even more to this. It's like, how can we make it even more easy for someone? And, you know, this decision fatigue, 100%, this is so realistic, so relatable, yet it's right under our noses and we don't see it, right? We're not kind of aware of it. So thank you so much for bringing that in. Now, I wanted to ask, you know, there was a question kind of mulling around in my head about, you said that, you know, having these sales conversations. Obviously, once we get on a call with someone, the conversation is what we're doing, and it's super important. Are there places that the conversation is starting before we get on a call that you kind of see as a key place to be having it in terms of even getting people to the call in the first place?
Well, again, the idea is that the call needs to be for their benefit and it needs to be easy, right? So there's a couple things that happen that I think we think it's easy for us, so we do it, but we don't think about, is it easy for the client? So for instance, one of the things that I teach is to use what I call 3 times language to make it easy for someone to pick a time to get on a call with me. Now, I actually write this out and I teach this. There's a structure to how this 3 times language works, but I give people 3 different ranges of time to get on a call with me. Now, a lot of people think, oh, I'm so clever. Like I know better than Nikki. I use a calendar link and I say, awesome. And that's not what I'm talking about. So stick with me for just a second because I love a calendar link too. But the thing about a calendar link is that most of the time, the calendar link is positioned for your benefit, not for the clients or the prospects. So if you're going to use a calendar link, you need to make sure that the language of how it's described about getting on a call, all of that needs to be for the benefit of the person who's having to take the action. Because as easy as a calendar link seems to you, you're asking the prospect to do the work, to book themselves on your calendar link. And a lot of times people won't do it because it's something else they have to do. So I always give 3 times, 3 ranges of time. And I do that because it makes it easy for someone to go, well, I can't meet with Nikki on Wednesday, but I think I have some time open on Thursday. Let me see if her times and my times match up. And then all they have to do is respond to my email and go, I'll meet you Thursday at 3. Versus I'll get on your calendar, I'll look for a time, I'll have to fill out your form, then I'll have to accept the calendar invite that gets sent to me. There's all these steps you're asking someone to go through. So every time you ask a customer to go through an extra step, at some point they're going to stall out and they're not going to complete. So if you want to increase your close rates, make it so easy for someone to get on that call with you. Don't put up barriers. Don't ask them to fill out a big intake form or answer a bunch of questions before they get on a call with you, because you're essentially saying to them, and I mean this with love when I say it, but you're essentially saying my time is more valuable than yours. So you do all the work and I'll just show up and decide whether or not I want to work with you. But that doesn't really land very positively with your prospects. They want you to earn their business. So you've got to be the one who does the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really good. Amazing. And
I feel like that was a soapbox moment for me.
So. Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, it's a really good conversation to have because, everybody's time poor, and I think that is something that we all have is a calendar link. And if you're having a conversation with someone first, I mean, I think, obviously if they've found you themselves and come onto your website and they're looking at your calendar, there's not much opportunity that you have
That's right.
for booking that in. Although you could be thinking, I guess, around the language that you're using in terms of what even you're saying there.
Yeah.
Like you might be suggesting to them, hey, let's talk this week, or give them like maybe an embedded command or something that helps them to kind of look at, well, let's look this week and see when we could match up. But yes, I think that it is so interesting, isn't it? Because when you do give someone a frame, it kind of helps them stop thinking and not to kind of, it's not just open and they've got to do all the work. You're giving them like a smaller container to do that thinking within, like, okay, well, which one of these works best for me, as opposed to it's just an open slather. You go into the calendar and find the time on any day. Yes. No, but that's a really good point. I think, it's so simple, but where can we make things more easy for people so that they do less thinking? I love it. We're so overloaded. I've really noticed a difference. I'm not sure if you have as well, but sort of since COVID ended and everybody's life is like ramped back up to 1,000,000% of speed, we're going at 1,000 miles an hour now instead of 100. I've found there is a difference. Like, I'm really conscious, and I'm one of these people who is a bit of an overthinker. I'm probably, I'm a multitasker. I've got hundreds of tabs open. You'd hate to see my computer.
The same, by the way.
But I tend to kind of, without realizing it, and I've noticed this in myself, I overcomplicate because I'm like, I think about all the different layers of the detail. And I'm on a real mission right now. I'm like, right, I just need to make things more simple, like explain my stuff more simply. Let's not get into all the deep thing. And it's been really fascinating, the experiments that I've been doing, like just with some social posts and stuff, when I'm like, instead of writing something really deep and thoughtful and meaningful like I would, I've just put something really light and fluffy out there, and people are like responding to it. And I was like, well, this is evidence of, just where our brains are at and what we can cope with. And they can't always cope with all of the deep stuff, even though it's so valuable. It's like, actually, we might not be serving as well to be diving into that. So I love it. Keep it really simple. This is like you're a woman talking to me about stuff that I really care about here. Time is so important. So we were going to talk about podcasting and how being on a podcast, whether you own a podcast or having a guest, but these can be really great opportunities to attract clients. And I guess this is like one of these instances where you could start, well, not necessarily start a sales conversation, but I want to open that up to you as to how you see this opportunity of being on podcasts. How is that a sales opportunity? What is the conversation that we're having to get new clients?
Yes. So podcasting for me is my number one source of marketing. So guesting on podcasts. Probably 90% of all of my leads come from podcasting. So, and I could say right now, it's probably like 95% of my customers, if you ask them, how did you first get connected to Nikki? They'll say, I heard her on so-and-so's podcast. So podcasting for me has been such an important way to grow my business. And it kind of started a little bit organically. Like I didn't get real intentional about it until 2019. And it was because when I looked at the end of 2018, where did all my clients come from? I was like backtracking, like, was it from speaking? Was it from, Facebook ads? Like, where was it? It was like 70% of my clients came from me being on podcasts. Well, I didn't even have a podcast back in 2019. I had been asked to just be on a couple people's podcasts. Like they were searching me out. So my philosophy in sales is once you know that something works, how can you like pour some gasoline on it?
Yeah.
So then in 2019 is when I hired a really effective podcast pitcher. So we got serious about actually pitching me onto my ideal podcast where there was something complimentary about what the host was doing and their audience would maybe be a possible fit for what my work is. So I almost never go and speak on like somebody's podcast that offers sales coaching, right? Because their people are there because they want to learn from that person. So bringing Nikki on, they're like, who cares what she has to say? But if you have an audience, so think about who is the right audience for you. And then we track our podcasts. So we know, because I offer something at the end every time I go on a podcast that's specific to that podcast. So we can track and see at the end, like, did this podcast, were the listeners interested in what, like in my message, and were they interested in getting more? So we give them a way to get more. And then from there, there's a bunch of other things that happen. But I think a lot of times people just go on a podcast and they think, well, we'll see what happens. And I think it's important to be more strategic. Like you go into the podcast with the idea of delivering huge value, using story to let people kind of get to know you and get that like comfort level with you. And then you offer them some next step, something that allows them to have a little bit of a deeper connection or vibe or training or something from you. And then you track that and you see, and then you can be strategic about which podcasts you would say yes to and which podcasts are just not the right fit, not the right audience.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Had there been any surprising ones where you sort of thought, well, I'm going to do this one, I'm not sure if that's going to be a real winner, and then you're being surprised about the outcome?
So many. So many. There are podcasts where, you know, they have like a huge following, they have a huge audience, and I think, oh my gosh, it's going to be so great. Like, you know, it's going to resonate. And then we'll get like one subscriber from the podcast. And then there will be other small podcasts where it like sometimes I think almost all of their listeners had to have subscribed to my email list, you know, or gotten the freebie because, you know, looking at the size of their podcast, like it's not that big of a podcast. So I say yes a lot. If somebody reaches out to me, I almost always will say yes to the podcast because I feel like a podcast host wouldn't reach out to me if they didn't feel like my message would be important for their audience to hear. But then there's other podcasts, like there's certain podcasts that you think, oh, these people would be so great. Like their audience is perfect. And maybe they'll subscribe to my email list, but they'll never buy. So there are certain podcasts that I have my pitcher avoid, like, please don't pitch me to these types of podcasts because their people are not buyers. They're just kind of like lurkers.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. I haven't actually dived into to figure out, I guess, the stats and the insights, but I know of certain podcasts that I've guested on that have definitely brought me clients. So I'm not as I haven't been tracking each individual one to know what subscribers they send me, but thank you for that idea. I think I'm like, interesting. I think I can do that now. But I do know that there's certain ones who have, just me appearing on that podcast has resulted in clients, which is amazing. And at the time I was really doing it. I mean, obviously you're doing it for that as an end goal, but I didn't realize really how powerful it was going to be. So it's amazing. What do you see some of the other mistakes that people make, either if they're hosting a podcast or guesting on a podcast? What would be the key mistakes that they're making in terms of not leveraging the opportunity?
Well, there's a couple things. I just want to throw this out so I don't forget to say to you, but the easiest way to track your podcast without having to create a million pages on your podcast for like opt-ins is we use Pretty Links. There's probably some other WordPress plugin that you can use, but if you have a WordPress site, Pretty Links is what we use. So I just want to, and I don't get any kind of kickback from Pretty Links. I'm just being really candid about that's what we use here. And that's how we track it, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's an easier way to track. But as far as answering your question about mistakes, one of the missed opportunities I see for podcasters is they don't have dynamic ads set up in their podcasts. So are you familiar with dynamic ads, and are you doing dynamic ads?
I am, but why don't you just explain them for anyone listening who isn't sure what that means?
Okay. So dynamic ads it allows for you to insert ads into your podcast, but feed them into your back catalog as well. So let's say that you have 100 episodes of your podcast. As long as you have it set up for dynamic ads, you could record an ad today that's for something that you're offering next week and run it to every single one of those 100 podcasts, because people start into people will find your podcast at different times. So just because you released episode 100 this week doesn't mean that's the episode people are going to start listening to. So somebody might find your podcast this week and listen to episode 10. You want that ad of what's going on right now in your business to run. And you don't want to have ads at episode 10 that refer to something that you offered 2 years ago that you no longer offer. So this is why dynamic ads are such an important piece. And you can run, I know with the platform that I use, we run what's called pre-roll ads. So it's the ad at the start. We can run mid-roll ads. So at any point, you can run an ad in the middle of the podcast, and then post-roll. And so sometimes we only run a pre-roll or a post-roll. Sometimes we'll run a mid-roll and a post-roll. Like, you have all this flexibility. And sometimes you can have multiple ads going, right? So I always have an ad for a freebie for my listeners. And then when I have some promotion going, then I'm running an ad for the promo too. So by selling something you're promoting to your listeners, it helps pay for your dynamic ad fees. So it's worth it to do, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. And I love how, it's just like you've got a little timestamp in the episodes. So when you put it in, that means that you can run the ads and it'll automatically feed them through, which is so cool. I don't have that in mind. And it's only because my platform, at the moment, I don't believe enables it. It's kind of a bit more basic. I'm on Kajabi for my website, and you can host your podcast on Kajabi, but there are benefits in terms of it brings all the traffic to my website. And there's a lot of benefit to doing that. But that is the one thing that I was like, if I was really, going to choose again or look at a platform again, and maybe move it, then that would be something that I'd be definitely looking for, is the ability to run dynamic ads. Because right now, yes, you do get my old ads on my old episodes, which is, good and bad. I think at times, it's kind of interesting, but then I always have to think about, if I discontinue something, what do I do with that link? People might be, going to an old link, and then you probably need to make sure that you've got a redirect in place to get them somewhere relevant. So it does complicate life a little bit in the back end. But anyway, I wanted to ask about, the language. You referred at the beginning to your staircase, your selling staircase, I think you called it, which, really piqued my interest. And is this something that you use in, when you're guesting on a podcast, for example? Do you use any of this type of language when you're having these conversations, or is this specifically when you're on a sales call, is your selling staircase a framework that you use on the call?
The answer is yes to both. So the selling staircase, it's made up of 5 steps. So the idea is to understand what step you're on in the conversation. And then once you understand what step you're on, it's easier to know what to do or say next to invite the person to the next step. So this is kind of a long answer to your question, but I promise I am answering the question. So with the 5 steps, there's step 1 of a successful sales conversation in the selling staircase is introduction. So whether I'm on a podcast, or whether I'm meeting somebody face to face, or whether it's through my website or on social media or whatever, there's things that you can do in step 1 to create a positive first impression. So there's things I would do with you as the host when we first get on a call together, to set the stage for building some credibility and also building that know, like, and trust. And then step 2 in the selling staircase is to create curiosity. Most people don't even know how to create curiosity or even think about it as such an important piece of the sales conversation. And yet it's really, truly the most missed step. And yet it's the most important step, because it's very hard to get to step 3, 4, and then 5, which is the close, if you don't create curiosity. So one of the ways around creating curiosity is to learn to plant seeds, to pique interest, which, by the way, you couldn't have set this up better for me, because you actually used those words. You said this thing and it piqued my interest. So so thank you for that, Jessica, just for the listener. We did not plan this ahead of time. No. But that's the idea, is through your story, through the way that you answer questions. There's more to it, and I have a whole training course on creating curiosity, and just it's probably the number one thing that my clients are constantly like, okay, let's figure out how to create curiosity here. I need your help, Nikki, with this or that. Because it's like building a muscle. It does take practice to get really good at it. And yet when you get good at it, what happens is people go like, tell me more about da-da-da, or what does that mean? And then now they're leaning in. And when people are asking you to tell more, when people are leaning in, it is essentially them giving you permission to like give enough information for you to see, am I talking to a potential client here, or are we just having a nice conversation? And so when I'm on a podcast, I'm constantly planting seeds and trying to pique curiosity. And how I know it works is because listeners reach out to me and go, Nikki, you said that thing and I need some help with that in my business. Or, oh my gosh, you did this thing and it made me rethink the way that I'm putting information on my website or whatever. Like, all of that has to do with me creating curiosity. So that's step 2. Step 3 is discovery. That is your consult call. And there's things that you need to do in that step to make it easy to move to step 4, which is the proposal. That's where you're actually selling, by the way. That's where you're laying out your offer. That's when you're pitching kind of the solution. And then step 4 and 5 go really close. Step 5 is the close. Step 5 is the second most missed step in the sales conversation. Most people might make it to step 4 in a sales conversation, and then they don't understand why people aren't buying. And they're like, oh, this person seemed interested, and then they kind of disappeared. Like, what happened? Almost always it's because they're missing step 5 in the conversation. They're not making it easy. This goes back to our earlier conversation. They're not making it easy for somebody to make a decision. And when you don't make it easy for someone to make a decision, they don't make a decision.
Yeah. Amazing. I was thinking, so when you're in step 3, the discovery, this is where you're kind of more asking questions. Is that what that would be looking like, where you're kind of finding out what it is that they're looking for, and then how obviously you're going to be able to match what you have to them if they are the right fit? Because obviously, we don't want to sell something to somebody who's not the right fit. But is that where you're doing that discovery? Like, is this going to vibe? Have I got the right thing for them? Like, is what they're looking for right for me as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a part of it, the discovery piece for me, which there's something you need to do at the very start that sets the conversation up for success. And then you do lead into having a set list of questions. Now, I don't mean that you need to sound like a robot and you're just reading off a script. That's not what it means. But the questions that you ask during that part of the conversation, it's more important than you giving advice. It's more important than you offering like free, solutions. The objective of the questions are to understand, am I talking to an ideal client? Do they have a problem or a need? Do I have a solution that meets that problem or need? And if so, do I know how to ask permission to then put a solution in front of them? So you mentioned kind of at the beginning of the call that sometimes when you were early starting out, you were doing this thing where you're like giving advice. and then talking people out of hiring you. And I think one of the misconceptions that people think, well, if I get on a sales call, my job is to be the monkey and dance and try to prove to somebody like, I can help you. So I'm like, I'm going to dance around here. I'm going to show you how great I am. I'm going to prove my worth. But that isn't actually the point. And they don't really care. Like you proving your worth actually puts them in a position of power, and it creates an imbalance in the dynamic in the relationship. I think in a sales conversation, there should be a balance of power. One, you shouldn't hold more power than the prospect. They shouldn't hold more power than you. And so the way to create this balance of power is through asking really smart questions. Your questions actually can demonstrate your expertise if you know how to frame the question properly. It will demonstrate your expertise better than you trying to prove how good you are or convince somebody at how much you can help them or what your experience is. You can ask smart questions that let somebody go like, dang, that's a good question. Jessica wouldn't have asked me that if she didn't know the answer. I need to know that. So I got to work with Jessica.
That's so true. And I think, there's so much that comes into this. And just speaking from, I guess, when I reflect back and the experience that I had, and then, to where I feel like I am now, a lot of that was, partly self-confidence. I think when you're not confident, you get on a sales call, you're just subconsciously feeling like what you said, like you need to kind of prove your worth or show them that you really can do something. And that tends to lead to just over talking, right? And so the person, you're doing all the talking and the person's there doing the listening. And that's actually, I found is almost the worst way to run a sales call, because they get off thinking, I've just got all this information, but you actually haven't led them into a conversation at all. And the real change, I think, I'm not sure exactly what happened, probably went through a few stages, but just completely shifted from it being about me and me doing the talking to it all being about them. And as you said, like asking questions. And it's amazing how different it feels to be on a call thinking, I'm actually here to create space for this person. They have something that they want to solve. We're going to have a conversation, but the best way I can help them is actually to ask questions of them and to kind of really hold that space. And whether they choose to go through with it or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just a totally different shift in the presence, in the way that the conversation flows, and you actually end up having more control over the conversation in a way when you're actually asking the questions and letting them do talking. And what did they say? Everybody loves to talk about themselves. So they get off the call thinking, that was amazing. I just had the best conversation. Because
that's so true.
To talk about themselves all the time, which is, it's human nature, but that's how you find out what it is that's important to them. Like if you're doing all the talking, you can't really find that out. And what's so funny is that, even though, so just sharing a story, back in my corporate days, I headed up marketing. I used to interview agencies all the time. They'd come in and pitch to us to get the business. And they'd come in with this slide deck and they'd get up there and talk about their agency just, for an hour. And after a few, well, to be fair, probably a lot of those, I started to be like, right, I am cutting these conversations off. I'd get into the room, I'd say, look, I don't want your pitch deck. I don't want you to show it to me. I don't want to know what your special process is, which is exactly the same as every other agency's. You'll just call it something different. But, that stuff is irrelevant to me. I want to know what it is that you're really good at. Tell me what you'd win an award for. And it was interesting. Some people would kind of come to the party. Some people would get really thrown and be like, but we want to win all of their business and we want to be good at everything. And I'll be like, you're not good at everything. Like, let's just be honest and fair here, because that's impossible. Even really big agencies with loads of people are not good at everything. So let's talk about what you're really good at and actually share with me what that is. And it's so interesting then when, I look at that and how I used to just be like, do not tell me all of the stuff. Don't just talk at me like, stop it. And then coming into, holding my own sales conversations in the beginning, and just doing all of this talking. And it was that I think I'd kind of clicked and reflected and thought, why am I doing this? It's like the exact opposite of a great experience for the person on the other end. they really just want to talk about what's important to them. They don't want to hear about all the other stuff. It's so interesting.
Yeah, and you nailed it too. I think the misconception about sales is that people think sales is something you're supposed to do to another person. Sales actually is something you should do with another person. So if you're talking at people, you're doing to. If you're talking with, it's a collaborative, it's a conversation. Questions, one of the most people sometimes think, well, if you're asking the questions, that means you don't know the answers. Actually, the person who asks the questions holds the power in a conversation. So if you're able to ask really smart questions, it brings that power dynamic back into balance. So you don't want to only be the asking questions. You need to give them an opportunity to ask you questions too. So there is, again, that balance of power. But I teach a with kind of way to sell, that it's collaborative, that it's conversational. And just like how you said of like, yeah, because I come from a corporate sales background. So I know those pitch decks. I know that, go in and word vomit all over people. And one of the best compliments that I used to get, because I worked at the manufacturer level. So I'd go out and do ride days with dealers and distributors and have these meetings with their clients. And they used to say, my reps would always say, like, the thing about you, Nikki, is you rarely give the same presentation twice, but you always get the same points out. And I'm like, well, that's because I'm asking questions and I'm tailoring my presentation to what's interesting to the person that I'm giving the presentation to. If I'm just like a monkey and I'm here to dance and you put on the music and I like just go and it's the same routine over and over and over again, like, what do you even need me for? Just get the monkey. Like, I don't need to be here. So I think it's really, really important that you are able to tailor your conversations. And so it gives you the freedom to have real connection and conversation when you're not trying to be like, look how great I am. I can do this. I'm good at everything. All my customers love us. Here's all the things they said. Here's the feeds and speeds about our product. Like, pretty soon people are like, I'm tuning out. Like, we're talked at all day long by sometimes our family members on social media, in the news. Like, people just talk at us constantly and our brains are tired. And if you want to engage somebody's brain, you got to talk with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you, because this sort of popped into my head as you were talking, and it's something that I think we all probably experience. And it's when, sorry, I'm going to backtrack slightly. I think this is a part of where people feel a bit of an aversion to sales and a bit like, I don't want to be that salesy person. But it's kind of, I think, born from this experience that we have, especially if you have an online business and you're getting somebody in your DMs or in your inbox and they're straight to the sale. Like, they want to get married with you. They haven't even responded or had any interaction at all, zero. And they're just like, blah, 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 I want to do this. Let's do it. And this, I kind of want to open up a little can of worms for you to dive into here, because I know that you mentioned a minute ago about, having permission or getting that permission to move from the discovery into the pitch, and how you do that so that the person is actually like, yes, I want to have this conversation with you. I want to hear about your offer. Because until they've said that, would that be true that they're just like, I haven't even said I'm interested? And this is something I struggle with, because I have people come into my DMs. Every now and then usually it's just delete. Like, you're just diving straight in here trying to sell to me. Most of the time it's highly offensive, because you're telling me you love my content, but hey, I see a real big problem with it. Can I share that with you? I'm like, great way to start a conversation. Like, give me a compliment that you completely just throw in the rubbish bin 2 seconds later by saying that you think that you know something better. And anyway, you don't even know what I want or anything about it. But every now and then I respond to someone. I say, mate, you don't even know anything about my business, and I haven't said that I have a need or a desire or a want. And some of them come back and they just are so confused. They're like, but what do you mean? I've gone through your whole business, is what one of them said to me last week. And you're like, okay, you've gone through like a micro dot of what you can see online that's probably taken you 5 minutes to do a quick review of something, and now you think you're the expert, and like you're an unknown person. You have no credibility with me at all. There's no conversation. Everything about it's wrong. And I'm kind of like, I'm always really wanting to help these people and kind of shine the light for them, but I never know how I can do it in a very short message, because I think if you don't get it, you're just not getting it. I think you're a bit of a lost cause. I don't know. I'm opening that up because I'm like, that's one of the things that my pet hate is, trying to have a sale or trying to get someone into a sale where they have not indicated any desire, any need at all. And you're just in there fishing and confused as to why they're not saying yes.
Yeah, I think I call that the shotgun approach to sales. I don't believe in it as a strategy. I think it's a terrible way to sell. And I personally don't think you should pitch anybody unless you have their permission to pitch them. So, people always say to me like, oh, Nikki, it must be so easy for you to earn business because you get all these people emailing you all the time and pitching you all the time. And you can just respond to them and be like, hey, you really need help with sales, so you should hire me. And I was like, I would never, even though I'm offended by the messages that they often send because they're so rude, of like telling me about my business. I mean, imagine going up to somebody that like maybe you saw them across the room at a restaurant and you go up to them, maybe they're sitting there having dinner and you sit down at their dinner table at the restaurant and you be like, I know so much about you. I've been watching you for 5 minutes. Let me tell you everything I know about you. That person would be like, get out of here. Like, go away. It's so offensive. I'm busy. I'm eating dinner. I'm paying to be here. Get out. And so doing that, showing up in somebody's DMs and word vomiting how amazing you are and all the problems they have. I also compare this to walking around with a piece of paper and giving people a bunch of paper cuts and being like, oh, bless your heart, sweetheart. You are bleeding. I sell Band-Aids. It's like, I'm bleeding because you just cut me 3 times. Of course I'm not going to buy your Band-Aid, you jerk. So, I feel pretty strongly about this too. Like, you should have permission before you put an offer in front of somebody. Now that people go, well, then I don't have anybody to sell to. Yeah, you do. You do the work. You put yourself out there and you attract your ideal clients. And then when you have permission, you put offers in front of them. This is why you sell to it. This is why you build an email list. This is why you put out podcast episodes. Like, this is what you're doing. You're marketing yourself and you're making yourself attractive that people go, oh my gosh, Jessica is so smart. She's amazing. I love what she talks about. I'm so into her. And I'm going to reach out to her in some way. And now, Jessica, you've got permission to offer them something. And they're going to be delighted to get that offer from you versus you just sending out a bunch of DMs for people who are like, who are you? I don't know you. You don't have any credibility with me. I always say, vote with your wallet, people. Stop giving people this, like, do not buy from any of these people. Do not reward this behavior, period. There's so many other ways to find people who are selling what it is that you need. You don't have to buy from these jerks that are showing up without your permission. I just won't. Like, I'm not even joking. I block at least 10 people a day from my email.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you don't have permission to even be in my email.
Okay. Sometimes I'm like, how did you get my email address? Who are you?
Yeah.
And then they follow up.
I figure you probably
up on this. I'm like, you're following up on what? I haven't responded clearly because I have no interest in what you're saying.
Yeah. Like, I don't need a team of engineers on my business. Like, stop telling me you're an engineer and you want to help build something in my business. I don't need an engineer. So yeah, I get it. And it's just, it's a terrible way to sell. And there's so many more effective ways that you can use your time and your money and your expertise to actually have real conversations with people who are actually interested in what it is that you do, so that you can make a bigger impact in the world and that you can make the change that you want to make, right? Like, most of us have that servant's heart. We want to serve. We want to do good in the world, and we want to get paid for it. So stop wasting your time and money word vomiting all over people who are like, I even tell you I'm interested. Like, get out of here.
Exactly. I'm so glad that you said that because, I think that sales gets such a bad rap, just, and it's because of these experiences that we have when we're getting sold to by someone that we haven't actually given them permission to be sold to. And when you are wanting to buy something, think about the difference in that conversation when you're like, wow, I'm really interested in this. And you actually are inviting someone to tell you about their stuff. You actually are engaged in that conversation. You want to hear about it. And that doesn't feel awkward or icky or anything else. But we seem to brandish this like sales is icky. And, I love that you said it is the marketing. And one of my things is like, if you've done your marketing right, the sales part is natural and it's just like, it's the transaction at the end. They already want your stuff by the time they're talking to you. And part of that, as you mentioned a moment ago, you're like, you need to be out there talking to them. They need to know what it is that you offer. You're not selling in your content, but you are planting seeds. You are creating curiosity, but you're also clarity, right? They know what it is. They're like, Nikki, I know what she does. She helps people with sales conversations. So they have that frame already. And they're like, that's what I need. Then they come to you. They're already there knowing this is what I want. Is Nikki going to be the right person for me? It's really like they're just doing that final check before they decide, as opposed to, I always think that people jumping into your DMs, it's like they've turned up at your door of your house completely uninvited, knocked, and they're like trying to barge their way in and like going, I can really see some things that are just wrong with your house. And like, why did you design it this way? And all this like uninvited advice. It's like, do not give unsolicited advice to anyone. That doesn't give you credibility, especially when you're completely unknown to someone. It was funny because this guy, and then he came back and said, I'm just a kid trying to make money. I'm like, and your credibility, it was already zero. It's now like sub 100 because you're not understanding why this is bad. And now you're telling me you're just a kid who has no experience. I'm like, and he's like, I have credibility. Gosh. I'm like, what is credibility? You don't even know what credibility is if you're telling me that.
That's right.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? But like you said, the sales part, there is some really great ways to do it. I'm loving what you've shared with us today around the conversation, the progression between each step. Because it breaks it down, makes it really simple. But it's like a lot of that is in the setup of what you've done before you're getting there and how you're planting those seeds. So that when you get to that point, you're having a lovely conversation. It doesn't feel awkward or icky at all. So this is a really great place, I think, to just ask one question about your email, because you have mentioned your email list a few times. And, if people have joined your list, for a freebie, they've obviously come in and that's what they've got. But then I know that the email list is still the number one place that sales are converted. Like it's definitely still right up there in terms of your marketing, in terms of closing a sale or getting that last part of the sale. I think the email has been leading, unless there's some new data out there that I haven't heard yet. But interested to hear your thoughts on that with the email list. When is it appropriate to make an offer? How do you take somebody from being a lead who's come in into moving them into that sales conversation?
Yeah. So I think you should treat your email list like an asset in your business. Most of the time I find that people treat their email list like a vanity matrix. They're like, look how big my email list is. Well, here's the thing. If you have never put out a promotion or an email to your list and offered them something to buy, you have a vanity matrix. You do not have a list. So I don't care what your number is. I don't care if it's 100 or 100,000 people on your list. If you have not sold to it, you don't know your list size. So I think you should sell to your list regularly and often. I think you should be putting out all different types of offers to your list on a regular basis. You have to train your list because it's an asset, because you spend money to grow it and manage it. If depending on your email list size, I know mine's it's a significant expense in my business to manage my email list. So therefore, I want to train the people that want to be on the list that you are going to get offers from me. I won't kick you off the list if you never buy anything, but I will I will remove you, or I'll make it so that you will remove yourself. If you're like, I hate this chick and I'm never buying anything from her, you will unsubscribe from my list because you're going to get offers put out to you regularly. So to warm up your list when somebody first joins, I actually teach a course called Conversion Email Sequences. And so I think there needs to be a sequence for everything. So an email sequence. So that means you don't just send one email and make an offer. That's not a sales offer. That's one email and it doesn't count. So you have to send multiple emails. So when somebody joins your list initially, you should have a set list of emails. It could be 3 to 7 that is warming them up, but ultimately there should be something for them to buy pretty early on in that sequence because they just got something from you for free, which is hopefully awesome and satisfying. I mean, what I give for free, I think is huge value and people find huge value in it, right? Which is why they sign up for it and then come back and they're like, dang, that was awesome. Like I learned so much, right? And then it's unsatisfying to that person who was like, this was really good. What else is there? If there isn't a what else offered to them. So they need to know what's available to them. So I think by email 4, there needs to be a sales offer to the list, like to somebody who has signed up for your list. And then there needs to be regular offers made to your list. So that could be, depending on your list and how you sell and what you sell, maybe you're putting out an offer every week. Maybe you're putting out an offer every month. Maybe you're putting out an offer every quarter. If you're not putting out an offer at least once a quarter, you have a vanity matrix. You don't know what your list size is because after a quarter, people forget they're on your list. And then you send them an email and they're like, I didn't give you permission to send me an email. And you're like, you signed up for my list. People are like, oh, this person's been on my list for 3 years. Well, how many emails have you sent in 3 years? 3. They don't know they're on your list. They have no idea.
So true. I love that. And I think that actually kind of ties it back to make it easy for them. Like you said, they're on your list, they signed up for something. And then if they don't know what else is available, are you asking them to go investigating and searching through your website and going on this great big treasure hunt? Like, they don't necessarily have time for that, but you have the ability to help them, to say, hey, if you're this and you need this, then here you go, blah, 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 here's the thing. And it's funny because I think we get in our heads about it as a person of like, oh, I don't want to like annoy people, or I don't want to, whatever. But it's actually not annoying them. If they want something else, you're helping them to see what that something else is without them having to go and do all the legwork. And I think that's really, I can be guilty of that exact same thing of offering free thing after free thing after free thing and then not giving them the thing that they can buy. And, it's like, well, actually that is a disservice, isn't it? We are making it hard for them. Why are we doing that? Why are we making it hard? Let's actually make life easier for them.
I love that. I love that you get that. I have a client that always comes to mind in these moments because her and I were speakers at an event many years ago, probably like 7 years ago now. And so we were just meeting for the first time and I got up and I gave my presentation on sales and it was about how to have casual conversations that convert. And at the end of my presentation, we were kind of standing off to the side and she came up and she was really proud of being able to say this to me. She said, so Nikki, I sell to adults. And so I'm instantly in my head going like, okay, why is she saying she sells to adults? Who doesn't sell to adults? I think we all sell to adults. Like I was trying to figure out like where she was going with this. And she goes, I sell to adults. And I was like, oh, okay, well, tell me more. And she goes, if somebody wants to buy from me, they'll let me know. And I said, oh, no, they don't. They actually won't let you know. You're not making it easy for them. And she was so taken aback. She's like, what? And then she ended up hiring me within like a week. And so we had our first session. I broke down like this idea of buying signals, how to recognize a buying signal, how to act on it, what to say, all these things. And she came back like 2 days after our first session. And she was like, I went to an event last night, Nikki. I closed 3 clients. I had no idea that I was supposed to ask people that when they gave me a buying signal, I was supposed to ask them and invite them to do business with me. She's like, I've never booked a client at an event that I went to. I booked 3 last night. She has gone on to be, she's such a success story. Like she's just crushing her business. And she comes back and works with me every time she's putting out something new or testing something new in her offer. Like she'll come back and want some support, some sales support. But it was such a game changer for her to make that shift. Like if people want to buy from me, they'll let me know. If you think that same thing, I love you. I'm saying this with love in my heart. You are wrong. That is wrong. That statement is hurting your business. And there are people out there right now who want to buy from you, but they don't know how because you're asking them to jump through a bunch of hoops and go dig and try to find ways to pay you money. They won't.
No, so true. And it's so funny how, we can feel like it's all there, but it's like, are you actually requiring someone to go on a treasure hunt? Or, what came to mind a minute ago, it was like, digging. It was like those things, I don't know if you have them in the US, but there's a big trend or a craze, I don't know what like going digging for dinosaur eggs for the kids. So you get this like block of, I don't know, it's like fake rock that they've created and they've hidden things in it. And then they're meant to like, excavate the stuff out of the rock. So sometimes it's like little dinosaurs or bones and now they're doing gems and anyway. It's like you give the kid this block of rock and go dig for the treasure. That's like literally what we're asking these people to do. Is like, it's all out there. Go and like, find it. Find where the treasure is.
That is such a great analogy. Yeah, I love that so much. Yes, you got it. You got it. Like you cannot make people dig. You cannot like ask them to jump through hoops. They just won't. But it doesn't mean they don't need you or that they don't want you or that they won't buy whatever it is that you're offering. So please make offers to your email list. And if you're not sure how to write the emails, then reach out to me. I have resources for you for that. Like it's just you're leaving business on the table. And more importantly, you are robbing people of what they're going to get out of working with you. Like what in their life is going to improve? How is their business going to grow depending on what you're offering, what your service or your product is. So stop robbing people. Stop making decisions for them. Let them make a decision for themselves. You also probably sell to adults. Like I get it, but even adults, they need to know what's available for them to make a right decision.
And sometimes people just, put yourself in their shoes and think, how many times have you thought, oh, I'm kind of interested, but I'm also holding back from asking. I'm holding back from asking for more info because whatever, maybe you feel a bit awkward, maybe you're not 100% sure. And if you ask, then it makes it sound like you're definitely in, whereas maybe you just actually want the invitation of like, would you like to know more? Yes, I would like to know more. That is a, you're taking a step forward. It's not a full commitment step. And it just feels so much better to the person, doesn't it? Because they've been invited to and then they still know they can look at it and they can still decide and make a decision. But you're just making it easy for them to take that step forward without, feeling like they're putting themselves both feet in one go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's the barrier. Now, you mentioned that you have something that's special for us that you have for every time you appear on a podcast. And we've just been talking about your email list, and I'm sure everybody's like, what is it? And, I really want to experience this for myself. So what is it that you had for us today? I'm curious because you planted the seed earlier.
Thank you for that. So I do have it's a mini training and it's called Mastering the Sales Conversation. So it's a deeper dive into the 5 steps that we went through pretty quickly. So it'll give you some specific language, some specific suggestions, and you can get it. This is for your audience. So if you go to yoursalesmaven.com/STB, right? So she's the business podcast. So STB, and then you can get that download. Then you'll be on my email list. We'll have an opportunity to connect. And I would love to hear, like, what was your takeaway from the podcast?
Yeah, amazing. I love that, because I did want to dive a bit deeper into those steps, and I know that we had such a lot to cover, and we've had a great conversation. We could clearly keep talking for ages about all this, but I love that that's in what you're offering for your freebie. So please go and download that freebie from Nikki. The link will be in the show notes, so it just makes it easy for you. But thank you so much for being so generous with everything you shared with us today on this podcast. I know that I've taken a bunch of notes here, and I think some of it's just like, you feel like, wow, there's just a light that's turned on. It's not that I didn't know that we needed to make things simple, but it's such a great reminder, like, where are we making things difficult? Because we can just become a bit oblivious to it, I think, when it's your own business. To you, it's obvious. Like, things are obvious, right? You're like, why doesn't everybody just know that? It's like, well, they don't, because they've got everything going on in their life and their business, and their brain is full of all this other stuff. So we're making them go hunting or digging for it. It's really hard, and they're not going to remember everything about your business either. So I love that we have really brought that conversation today. What a great reminder, and can just have such a huge difference. So thank you, Nikki.
Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Now, would you like to share where you hang out? Do you have a social media account or place that people can connect with you if they want to follow you for more?
Yeah, I tend to hang out on Instagram, so you can follow me under Sales Maven. You'll find me there. I'm sorry, it's Your Sales Maven is what it is. I don't know why I said that. Your Sales Maven. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there under Nikki Rausch. Or Sales Maven. There's a business page there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you and your time and joining us today.
Thanks.